introducing our guest speaker, Krista Cheney, a good friend of mine, and from the Jewish synagogue congregation Shahareth Israel, that's here in Lubbock. He is a lay leader for religious prayer and services on occasion. He constantly reminds me and likes everyone to know that he is not a rabbi, but a lay leader in his congregation. I have been to several of his services at Congregation Shahareth, and have been. They're just the liturgy is beautiful and encouraging, and the atmosphere there. So if you had a chance to go, especially as part of interfaith or some of the interfaith events that happen there, I don't know if they get started up again this year or not, but if you have a chance to go, they are a welcoming congregation, and it's a pleasure to introduce him. His message today is about understanding and effectively responding to anti-Semitism. So I give it over to Krista.
I got my timer with me this time, I promise. I should have said it though. There we go. Okay, timer's going. Well, first of all, as I get my Mac back ready again, Josh, thank you again for having me over. Thank you for also recommending this subject, which it's actually very important to understand anti-Semitism. It's a lot more problematic than people think it is. People think it's not a big deal. It is. The latest numbers are 1 in every 4 Jewish Americans have either experienced anti-Semitism directly within the last 3 weeks or sooner. Over 90% of that has been online. The 10% that has not been online are those who are not on social media. Come on. After, there we go. In order to understand how to effectively respond to anti-Semitism, we need to know how it is caused, how it happens, and sometimes why. If we understand how it happens and why, then we can understand how to respond to it effectively, a key word, effectively. Because you don't want to make the problem worse. At least not for me, please. So what exactly is anti-Semitism? The basic definition of anti-Semitism is any kind of discrimination against, prejudice, or hostility towards Jews. And I emphasize, because they are Jewish. As we understand, anti means opposed to or against, and Jewish people are one of the various Semitic peoples of the world. And it has been known to be called the oldest hatred in the entire world. And sadly, it still has not gone away yet. The earliest known anti-Semitism is found in a surprising source. If any of you have spent any time reading the Bible, whether it's the Jewish Bible or even a Christian version, you've probably read the book of Esther. And most academic scholars date the book of Esther to about the year 400 or 300 BCE. And in Esther chapter 3, we read about this man named Haman. And the book of Esther was actually recently read completely by the entire Jewish community just last week to commemorate the event. In it, there is a man named Haman, and you notice some of the things that he says. There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the other peoples in all the provinces of the nation, whose customs are different from those of any other people. Now that Haman was telling the truth. Here's where he lied. Who won't obey the king's laws. It is not in your majesty's interest to tolerate them. If it pleases your majesty, let an edict be declared for their total destruction. And Haman had the audacity, apparently he was a rich fellow, he offered to pay 333 tons of silver. I've only got 6 or 7 ounces of silver in my home, so I can't imagine having 1 ton, let alone 333 of it. And what's surprising is this king gave Haman the power. And the king said, the money and the people are both yours to do however you like. Later on, in other texts known as the Apocrypha, if you have a Catholic Bible and some Anglican Bibles, you'll find the first book of the Maccabees. It's been dated to approximately the 2nd century BCE, and in it we find a historical account of a Jewish holiday we all now know as Hanukkah. In 1 Maccabees 5, we read, when the nations, ethneto in Greek, this is where we get the word ethnicity from, all around had heard that the temple altar had been rebuilt and the sanctuary was dedicated as was before, they became very angry and they determined to destroy the descendants of Israel. So they began to kill and destroy the people. They weren't real big on religious freedom, were they? Too bad there weren't any UUs yet. Yeah. This account in 1 Maccabees 4, you actually find a little hint of it in the Christian New Testament in John chapter 10, where Jesus is in the temple, and it says he is commemorating the rededication. So it's kind of interesting how a Jewish holiday is mentioned in the Christian Bible. But that shouldn't be really surprising, especially since in Luke 4 we read, and when he, this is talking about Jesus, came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, he went into the synagogue, that's a Greek word, on the Sabbath day as was his custom. And he stood up to read. But the problem also is in John 8, where Jesus is more portrayed as not necessarily Jewish, even though the New Testament is very clear that he actually was a very observant one and accepted as a fellow Jew. In John 8, we see how the Jews answered him, are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and have a demon? My question is, which Jews are these? Every single Jew in the entire nation said this? I don't think so. And in John 8, we see that Jesus says, I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, but you dishonor me. And there is this back and forth argument between this collective group called the Jews, implying that it's all Jews and not only some, having this back and forth, very hostile argument. And to read where Jesus says, you do not know him, but I know him, referring to the eternal one. If I would say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you, but I do know him. Doesn't really paint Jews in a very positive light, does it? Especially for so many people that are very insistent that John's account and the rest of the Christian New Testament is what they view as the perfect, inspired Word of God. And oftentimes I see people simply commenting a single short reference or two in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9. And they put up, there's this term, synagogen ton satana, synagogue of Satan. So a lot of people quote Revelation saying that Jews are the synagogue of Satan. Well, hold on though. In the full verse it says, those who say they are Jews but actually are not. So Jews are the synagogue of Satan, then how are they Jews if Revelation 2:9 and 3:9 says they're not really Jews? So how are they really Jews then? Oh, by the way, Jews don't worship Satan at all. Come check any of our prayer books we use in our services. The only prayers you'll see are directed to God, and Judaism has never believed in a Satan to begin with. But even after the New Testament, the anti-Semitism greatly increased. A bishop known as Eusebius of Caesarea, who lived probably around 260 to 339 or so, in the very first page of his text called the Ecclesiastical History. And I know for a fact that this congregation has a translation of it in your library. You can see it for yourself. He says, ravaging the flock of Christ unsparingly like grim wolves. To this I will add the fate which has beset the whole nation of the Jews from the moment of their plot against our Savior. Apparently, Eusebius kind of forgot a few passages in his New Testament that records Jesus saying, no one takes my life from me, I give it up on my own free will. So, which is it? Did Jesus die for their sins? Or was Jesus murdered against God's plan? How can you have it kind of both ways? I don't see how that works. When you start asking these people certain questions and really makes them thinking, I noticed really quickly, a lot of them shut up really quick. And they want to go and research it more. Or maybe they're just getting more ammunition. Who knows? Now these, what you're going to see here, these are 5-star reviews on Amazon. Someone said on March 9th, last year, these are barely a year old, truth will set us all free. The truth, whether it is uncomfortable or not, is great. There is enough lies and someone must tell the truth. The truth is only posed by those who share the shame and the guilt of a lie. Truth must be told and heard. Another person, giving another 5-star review to this book on June 21st, said a great book written by a great man and a founder of the Lutheran Church. Many people are too brainwashed to even read this book, and it appears the people at Amazon don't want us peasant class reading it either. The fact that this book is banned tells you all you need to know about whether this book is true or not. Many people need to start drawing their own conclusions, using their own minds, and not listening to the talking box who is run by the people the author is talking about. And the other review, I just had to quit looking at them. Excellent. Truth from a truth teller. This book was first published in the year 1543 by a prominent theologian originally in German. And since I've given you this much information, most of you probably know who this author is. In case you don't know, yes, Martin Luther. In 1543, within his book, he advised that unless Jews give up Judaism and become Christians, they should be expelled from all Christian countries. He literally demanded the burning of synagogues with Jews locked inside of them, as well as the destruction of their religious texts, the public execution of rabbis, and far, far more. You notice the English translation that I found? Jews surrounded by fire, and there's someone putting more wood onto the fire to burn the Jews alive. And tragically, far too many people decided to start doing this themselves. But long after Luther had passed away, in 1930s and 1940s Germany, the High Chancellor at the time, you know who this fellow was, he took this book and he actually reworked it and he called it My Struggles. You all know it in German as Mein Kampf. Yes, Adolf Hitler, who began taking Luther's advice. One of the things that Luther and Hitler both professed as the truth, and people still do claim, is that the Talmud insists that Jesus is burning in hell. Well, Judaism doesn't believe in hell to begin with, so how could Jesus be burning in hell? How could the Talmud say that if Judaism doesn't believe in hell to begin with? And I get this reference all the time, so actually I have the book in print at home. And it doesn't say Jesus in the text. It actually says certain sinners of Israel. They said to him, he said to them. It's in the plural. They're not ever named. And you can actually see the page for yourself for free on edof.com. Whoa, slow down, man. But if you don't know Aramaic, especially since the Talmud does not have any vowels or even any punctuation, it does help to have vowels and punctuation, right? Yeah. There are a few translations of it in English. Some you can read online. If you want to go for a very traditional translation, there's one by the Sonsino Press. It's about 30 volumes. Yes, I have it. Took up a little bit of space on my desk, but I got it. The translation says very clearly, certain are the sinners of Israel. If you are more academically leaning and want a bit more scholarly translation on it, you can get it on CD-ROM by the late Professor Jacob Neusner, if you don't feel like buying all 22 volumes of his. The Talmud it's got a lot of material in it. I'm not too thrilled with how Professor Neusner translated something in the text towards the bottom. I'm not saying it up here. I'm not going to say it, but y'all can probably notice it. I would have translated that word a little bit differently. Not S-H-T. But even if it did say Jesus, the question would be, which Jesus is it? Could it be the Jesus mentioned in the apocryphal book called Sirach, which was almost 400 years before the Jesus of Christianity was said to have been born and lived? Could it be this Jesus of Nazareth found, that is a stone ossuary that was found in 1980, and the name in Aramaic says Jesus, the son of Joseph. So was it that Jesus found in this stone ossuary back in 1980? What many people don't understand is if you hear the name Jesus, almost everyone, and still, I'm still in this habit, we think of only one single person, a certain Jewish teacher that lived approximately almost 2,000 years ago, who died about between 30 and 33 CE. But the issue is, Jesus was the single most common name for Jewish males. Yeah. Now, Christo is not a very common name. Chris and Christopher, that's a little more common, but Christo is not so much. For about 500 years, scholars think that nearly 70 to almost 80% of Jewish males were named Jesus, at least in Aramaic. And I have a volume of the Talmud. It's volume 21 out of 42. It does say Jesus the Nazarene in that text. But then what people don't realize is the note at the bottom on the page, the translator is saying, the Jesus the Nazarene referred to in these accounts cannot be the individual around whom the Christian faith was established. Many commentators suggest that either some, or most likely all Talmudic references to Jesus must refer to another person. So there goes that claim that Jesus is in hell according to the Talmud. Apparently that's been debunked, but good luck getting people to buy a $50 volume 21 of this Talmud edition and showing them. That's why I got a picture of it. And if anybody has ever told you that, well, he's read the Talmud, I say, the whole thing? Are you sure he's read the whole thing? Oh yeah. How long did it take him? Oh, a year or two. I don't think so. The smallest Talmud in print, you see it right there, that's on my desk. It's about 30 volumes, the full Aramaic text. If you take the Daf Yomi program, reading a page front and back every day, reading the page for a whole hour, and that's just reading it, I didn't say understanding it, it would take you about 7.5 years to read the entire collection of material. So if somebody says they've read the whole Talmud, maybe you should ask them how long it took them to read it. If they say it's less than 7.5 years, sorry, they're lying to you. And the problem is, so many people are not going to take the time to read it, let alone in the original language. And the problem with that is, when people don't take the time to examine the actual text themselves, to be sure, what happens is tragic events that we know as the Holocaust. Now these badges in this frame that I took this recently. Every single one of these badges has been proven to be authentic. Every single person that was forced to wear one of these armbands or these badges, every single one of them died in the Holocaust. None of them survived. The two purple triangles that you see, they weren't worn by Jews. Those were actually worn by a couple of Christians. Shockingly, even Christians were brutally murdered in the Holocaust as well. And by the way, you don't have to travel far to see these badges. You don't have to travel to New York City. You don't have to go overseas or to Dallas or to Florida or LA. These badges are right here in Lubbock, Texas. If you come to my synagogue on a Friday night for services just to visit, if you would like to see them, you can come find me. I will walk you down the very hallway and I will show them myself if you would like to see them. And yes, every single one of them has been authenticated. So when somebody says Holocaust is a lie, or they call it the Holo hoax, I nearly throw up every time, because we have far more than enough evidence, including, thankfully, still some survivors to this day, very few left, to prove otherwise. But the problem also is, especially in the age of the internet with social media, information can spread so fast. If I put something out on Twitter or my YouTube or Facebook, I have no idea how far it's going to travel. This is a book that was written in the 1890s. In part 2, it says the precepts of the Talmud concerning Christians. I actually have this in a PDF. And it took me a very, very long time to work through the whole thing. Every single claim in it has been proven false many times. But of course, again, how many people have the Talmud in print in their home other than me? Probably not many. But the whole thing about saying how all Christians should be killed, killing a Christian is an acceptable sacrifice to God. Well, never mind the 20 plus verses in the Jewish scriptures that say that a human sacrifice is never accepted. Never mind the multiple times where the Talmud itself says that any time that a person murders a human being, it is considered as if they had murdered an entire world. And apparently, people spread this misinformation, keep kind of skipping over Leviticus 19:18, which is known as the Holiness Code, where it says, Lo tikum velo titur et b'nei amecha, ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha ani Adonai. Do not take any revenge or bear a grudge against your neighbor. Love your fellow as yourself. Many people refer to this as the Golden Rule. And backtracking to the Talmud for a moment, the same sage that was part of the Chalice Lighting, Hillel, when he was asked by somebody, teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot and I will convert to your religion. Hillel raised his leg and he said very succinctly, Da'alach senei v'chaverecha v'havrach La ta'aved. Zohi kol haTorah kula ve'edach peroshehu zil gemor. That which is hateful to you, do not do to another. The rest is commentary. Now go learn the commentary. So if somebody tells you that the Talmud is an evil satanic book, or it's full of violence and hatred, there's a little passage you can show to anyone to prove them wrong. Shabbat 31a. And there's the passage from Hillel. So at this point, that's really kind of just a little sample of what causes anti-Semitism and a couple of techniques on how to accurately, effectively respond to it to correct misinformation. And to summarize it, the best way to combat misinformation, as best as we can, is with easily accessible, accurate, and easily provable information that anyone can find without struggle. Timer never started, really? Okay. So I want to take a couple of moments to ask any of you to offer any, if you have any questions, you are welcome to ask. Yes, Francesca. It's okay to ask.
Well, I actually have a ton of questions, but they're like of the scholarly bent.
My email's up there.
And I'm just gonna get you to lunch, and I'm gonna pick your brain about a lot of these things. But now I only have a couple of remarks. Remark number one. It actually wasn't the Jews who killed Jesus, it was the freaking Roman. As a descendant of those people, come after me. If you have to come after someone. Number one. Number two, I take everything that you're saying seriously, but I also want to add, it shouldn't really matter. It shouldn't really matter. I mean, the Bible and Christian writings, the fact that, Luther said, oh, we have to exterminate the Jews, is not a good reason today to go after Lutherans. Nobody thinks of it that way. So even assuming that what you've said is a matter of misinterpretation, which I don't, okay? I'm just giving the best case scenario here for the anti-Semitic person. Even assuming all that, it's still a really bad, and I'm restraining myself, reason to go after people. End of rant.
And I forgot to mention earlier, never mind that the New Testament even says the Jewish leaders are responding, we cannot put a man to death. That's in the New Testament. So, again, how did the Jews murder Jesus if their own New Testament says we can't put a man to death?
Exactly. They didn't have the death penalty.
They couldn't.
Sorry.
So my question to you, Christo, is about how you experience anti-Semitism here in this community. What do you see, or what does your congregation see as the most? And I'm more referring to the in-person. I know you said 90% of it is through social media, but I've talked to a couple of teachers who are Jewish and who have said that they experienced some anti-Semitism within Lubbock ISD when they were teaching many years ago, but that's the only context I've ever heard anti-Semitism being expressed in this community. But I'm very curious as to what your experience and others' experiences are, and how we can combat anti-Semitism in this community.
It's very tricky because you have to understand where the misinformation is coming from. Is the source reliable? If the source is quoting something, say the Talmud, is the translation accurate? The Talmud was not written in English. English would not exist for almost 1,000 years later. But if they're quoting the Talmud, why would you quote a very long, elaborate commentary on another text that most people spend on average about 6 years learning first? If you're going to read a commentary, maybe you might want to get used to what the Talmud is commenting on. And by the way, it's really thick. This is the smallest one I could find. It's the whole thing. Again, no rush getting through it all. It'll take you a while. But one of the most disturbing cases of anti-Semitism is when my services were being done on Zoom only one Friday night. And it was the one time I forgot to make sure the front door was locked. Take a wild guess. Somebody came in that should not have been there. And I'm talking with him that night, and it's just me and 2 other people in the building. And we're in the library, and he said, well, there's a difference between killing and murder. I will do as God commands me. So, and never mind, I am scared nearly to death. I looked at my watch and I said, "You've got less than 4 minutes to get back in your car and leave this parking lot. The sergeant is on his way." He just texted me. "If you're not gone in less than 4 minutes, you will be meeting him." And the man not only did not leave, someone else spotted him hiding in a hallway, trying to go into one of the classrooms while I was closing up the building. So after we were sure he was gone, I checked every single room. The doors were locked. I turned on every light in the entire building. It took almost an hour. And I found a small little stone that was propping one of the side doors open. Yeah, I spoke with LPD, and we made very sure that we have somebody from LPD that arrives for anyone else. He's the first one on site. If he sees someone there that he's not recognized, he will approach the person and introduce himself. He'll get your name. And he takes a note of everyone's license plate numbers, as well as their VIN numbers. And he is usually there, the last one to leave as well. So it's really kind of frightening when the anti-Semitism is right there in your face. And I'm like, what in the world am I going to do? The main thing is assume nothing and question everything. And ever since then, I make dadgum sure every door's locked. I don't care. And I still check all the rooms just in case. Don't want to end on such a bad note. Riley, yes?
In practical terms, what's the best way to intervene if you see somebody heckling a Jewish person? For instance, this isn't a Jewish person, but I had an Islamic family living beside me in an apartment complex one time, and there was somebody heckling them, and so I have heard that it's best not to actually approach or talk to the heckler, but rather speak to the people who are being discriminated against, and so I just brought in their groceries with them, basically. Because I couldn't think of anything else to do. In your experience, what's the best thing to do if you see them happening?
Try to assess as best as you can and make sure that you are also safe and protected too. In that kind of a situation, there are times like where I saw somebody being very anti-Muslim against a woman wearing hijab. And I walked up to her and she didn't know me. I asked her, "Do you feel threatened?" And she did not speak to me. She nodded her head. And I pulled my phone out and I said, "Would you like me to call the police for you? They're on speed dial." And she said, "Please." As soon as she said, "Please," this person harassing her hauled it fast. That's almost the only thing that I can think of that kind of helped me to understand how to help this person. And sometimes on the spur of the moment, you can't really know exactly how to respond every time. So a lot of it is just a lot of questions, which is what really makes it very frightening. I don't mean to discourage you from helping someone if you can, but just make sure that your safety is not put in jeopardy as well as much as you're able to.
Another thing, I just wanted to mention that sometimes using your own privilege without directly getting into an argument with someone can be very helpful. Like, I've heard lots of stories about older women or young men walking up to a young woman they see as being followed and pretending to know, "Hey, how are you?" You know, so a lot of times, if someone sees that there is what they perceive to be a known ally to the person who's being harassed, they will go away.
I didn't think of that. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So you don't always have to directly try and argue with someone who might turn dangerous. You can just
That is a good tactic.
be a friend to someone who's being harassed, basically.
That's a very good tactic. I don't think I would have ever thought of that. I appreciate it.
I've read that one before. It's the thing to do is just, hi, how are you?
You can also call 911 and pretend like you're on the phone with somebody else, and if they notice that what you're saying is weird,
They will investigate.
They're trained to pick up on that. Like if you call and start ordering a pizza, they'll be like, well, that's weird. And if you keep repeating that address, no, I'm at such and such place, they'll be like, okay, I need to send somebody there and figure out what's going on. They'll listen to the background and see what people are saying in the background.
And every 911 call is recorded, and after so many seconds, your exact position is on their database, on their map.
And they can refresh that to get a better location for you.
Mhm.
So they can't get like a vertical. So if you're on the 3rd floor, they may not know, but they can get a very accurate address.
So if you'll think of questions later on during the week, I'm going to leave my email up here. You're welcome to be in touch if you would like for more questions. But it's high time that I ask my friend Josh to, come on, get your tush back up here on the beam. It's time for Carry the Flame, I think.
Flames and tushes, okay.
Don't set your tuition.
Oh, well, this topic is important to me. My family history does have Jewish lineage, and there's, in the 19th century, a lot of Rabbi Levi Franklin Salmonses in my family, and on both my mother and father's side, it all comes through Germany, whether Jewish on my dad's side and German on my mother's. And we've got a lot of stories and history of people, relatives, that went through those times. And I've seen, it's always amazed me what human beings are willing to do to another, including this time with the Ukrainian situation. And which brings me to, hopefully if this thing opens for me, the closing words by Pastor Martin Neimoller. And some of you may be familiar with this saying. First they came for the socialists.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. Who's the trade unionists?
Trade unionists.
My dad was.
You're okay, trade unionists. And I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Finally, they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Please rise in body or spirit. And somebody help me lead with Carry the Flame.
Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again.
Peace be to you and shalom.